Today, my fair citizens, we are on an investigation. We're looking for clues. We all know well that this is the most wrinkly outfit that I have ever put on in my entire life, because I do not have an ironing board anymore. So, this is just kind of what happens. But let me show you the top 5 decks that I will be making and playing. First off, super excited for this set. This set's going to be wild and wacky. There's going to be clues all over the place. If Karn was legal, there's no way Karn would be legal. I'm surprised he's still here at all. Let's get right into it. All right, so coming in at number 5, there's this card that we have called Doorkeeper Thrall. Now, I'm really excited about this card because it's got flash and flying, number 1, but it has the ability of artifacts and creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. Now, according to my hypothesis, when I hypothesize things in my hypothesizing chair, a lot of people do a lot of abilities that they like triggering. So, if a creature entering the battlefield triggers something, let's make it not trigger. Now, in Historic and other formats, there's a lot of other things that we can actually use to have this be an advantage for us. But in Standard, it doesn't seem to be that way, so we're going to have to be more of a hindrance to the opponent. So that's what this deck is going to be revolved around, more of a kind of like a hate bearers deck. But I still think we're going to need another set or so in order for it to be as effective as it should be. So we're also using a card called Academy Lore Master, which I have never, ever, ever seen anybody use before. I don't know if that's because it's bad or if it's terrible, but who knows? So this is a 2-mana, 2/3 wizard. That at the beginning of each player's upkeep, they may draw an additional card. Now, if they do, spells they cast this turn cost 2 more to cast. That could be devastating, but it could also be very good. Again, if we're in Historic, we could put down anything that prevents them from drawing an additional card. We would have things that make things cost less, but in Standard, we don't really have a lot of that. So we either have to go into green, or we're just going to stay in blue-white and use some removal or use some other creatures. So we're just using a bunch of other creatures, right? And that's what we got to do. So we're making everything more expensive, but still being able to draw cards, because we still need our card advantage in order to actually win. So in order to help slow down the game, we have the OG Thalia, of course, because non-creature spells being 1 more to cast is always beneficial. We want to avoid all of the board wipes, or at least as long as we can anyway. So we're going to avoid board wipes if we can. We also have Soul Petition for our targeted removal. This just gets any non-land permanent, because it turns out any non-land permanent is better than a specific permanent. And it's just a colorless and a white, so it's actually a very good card. Granted, it doesn't get rid of it permanently, but it does make it cost 2 more, which can be very, very annoying, especially when it starts stacking on things. Now, another new card that we're going to be running into is Sanctuary Wall. Sanctuary Wall is a 0/4 defender. Typically, that's terrible, but it does have an ability of 3 mana, tap target creature, and then you may put a stun counter on it. And if you do put a stun counter on it, you also put a stun counter on the wall itself. Now, this kind of sucks, but we're also going to be running Forensic Researcher with this. Now, this is just some weird combo that I just randomly found. I don't even know if it's really a combo. I mean, it's kind of a combo, more of a synergy than anything else. So it's a 2-drop into a 3-drop, but Forensic Researcher has an ability of tap to untap another target permanent you control. So we can essentially pay 3 mana, tap Sanctuary Wall, put a stun counter on one of their creatures, and then we can untap our wall manually, and then put a stun counter on another one of those creatures, and then put a stun counter on the first one again, and put a stun. We basically perpetually have 2 creatures tapped, but we perpetually have two creatures tapped. The difference is that their 2 creatures are probably way more impactful than our 2 creatures. So we don't really care that much. Another new card that we're going to be running is Assemble the Players. Now, you'll probably see this in a lot of the decks that I'm going to be showing you here today because this card is amazing. But you get to look at the top card of your library at any time, and this is in white. This is a 2-mana white card. Now, once each turn, you may cast a creature spell with the power 2 or less from the top of your library. And this is where a lot of these cards come in handy because almost everything in our deck is power 2 or less. There is only one exception, and that is the Anointed Peacekeeper. So we're hoping a lot that we don't find that, at least at the top of our library. Or we cast something, and then that's up next when we draw it, right? So Anointed Peacekeeper, it's pretty cool. It's as it enters the battlefield, so it's not an enter the battlefield effect. Because remember, the thrall that we have stops all enter the battlefield effects, right? So this is an as it enters the battlefield. You get to look at the opponent's hand and then choose any card name. Spells that they cast cost 1 more of that name, and then abilities activated, sources of the chosen name also cost 2 more. So this is actually very, 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 very good card. It's just unfortunately we can't actually get it from Assemble from Players. But Assemble from Players is really nice. It's basically card draw, right? And then our Big Daddy, our Mac Daddy, Mac Mommy, Big Mommy, Ultimate, crazy card, finisher, I guess you would say. Even if it is a finisher, I don't even know if it's a finisher. It's basically a finisher. It's Archangel Elspeth. We get to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink, which is never really a bad idea because we like life. Everybody loves the life. It has flying. It's great. It's a good chump blocker if we need it to. But it can also put 2 1/1 counters on target creature, and then it becomes an angel in addition to its other types, and it gains flying. This is fantastic because giving any of our creatures flying and lifelink is just going to help us survive. That's really the grand scheme of things, but we don't want to do that particularly. We want to get her up to the -6 because I'm assuming once we're able to get out Elspeth and able to ultimate, the opponent has probably destroyed the board or destroyed our creatures or done a lot of stuff at that point in time. Hopefully we've slowed them down a bunch with the amount of taxing that we've done, even though there's not a whole lot in standard right now. But hopefully we've done enough to at least slow them down or hurt them quite a bit. Because her -6, the ultimate, return all non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is gross because everything in our deck is 3 or less except for that Elspeth. So we're just going to bring everything back, and then we should just win. It should be pretty easy, hopefully, unless of course they have another like Wrath of God or something in their hand, or whatever, destroy all creature, you know what I mean. This deck, I'm most worried about working, but I really want to get some type of taxes to work in standard. And I think we're on somewhat of a right track. It may just take a little bit more tinkering with. So I'll be excited to mess around with this one. All right, coming in at deck number 2. Now, this one's going to utilize Delny. Now, I think Delny is disgusting. It's going to be an absolute house of a card. I think there's like 4 or 5 different decks that I want to build that have this card. And there's so many different ideas. I could go on for like 2 weeks and just play this card in completely different archetypes, and you would have no idea. You'd be like, wait, what? So what it is just a 3-mana 2/2. Creatures you control with the power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with the power 3 or greater. So essentially you want to keep your creatures power low, and if you can, or if you need to, you can buff their creatures, which I haven't really found a way to like AoE buff their creatures. I haven't really found a way to do that. So if you know, let me know in the comment section below. I don't think there's a way in standard, but I don't even think there's a way in historic either. There could be. We'll have to go investigating. But the other ability it has is if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. Now, I really like that because there are two main win cons in this deck. They kind of work together. So I guess it's kind of like one main win con. But the main one is going to be Ariat of the Charmed Apple. Now, people sleep on this. People sleep on this so hard, especially with that coming out. With Delny out, it's ridiculous because that means that Ariat triggers 2 times because Ariat's naturally a 2/4. So it's a 3-mana 2/4. Each creature that's enchanted by an aura you control can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. So it's almost like a pillow fort type thing. And then at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of auras you control. So if you have a lot of cheap auras and this procs twice every single turn because you have a Delny out, you're going to be punching people for like 10 damage a turn. You're going to gain 5 or you're going to gain 10 life. Yeah, you're going to gain 10 life, punch them for 10. So, I mean, that's really, really nice. All you need is 5 auras, do 10 damage, gain 10 life. However, we're also running Bloodletter, which is a 2/4 specifically. If an opponent were to lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. So, if you have 5 auras, Delny, Charmed Apple, should be ideal, I guess. You win in 1 turn. That's a 1 turn. That's a 1-hit KO. Granted, this deck is going to be able to fight through. It's not like a combo deck, really. It's meant to last for a very long time, so we don't really care about that. But that's essentially what you would require. But one of the other things I was really interested in messing around with that I'll probably end up taking out, but it was just funny to me. Just because Bloodletter isn't legendary, because I investigated it a little bit. Did a little investigation. It's not legendary. So you have Mirrorhall Mimic. Mirrorhall Mimic, it's a 0/0. You can have it come into the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it's a spirit in addition. So, that's pretty cool. But if it ends up dying for whatever reason, we can disturb it for 5, which means just cast it from our graveyard. And then it becomes an aura, which is at the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types. But we do this every single turn. So we could just get a bunch of Bloodletters. They have to board wipe or they're screwed. That's the only thing they could do to get rid of it. But we have 4 Mirrorhall Mimics. I don't think we have enough non-legendary creatures to support that at all. But we can take their creatures. And that's kind of what matters. Because even if you flip it, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature. So we can still enchant their creature with the aura and get copies of their creature at the beginning of our upkeep, which is all that really matters, like I said. So then they would have to destroy their own board if they don't want us to have their creatures. So it's kind of nice. It's nice, but I don't know if it's going to work. It's still kind of expensive. It's 4 mana, so it's the highest end of our curve, which isn't too bad. But it is an aura, and it can be creatures, chump blockers. I mean, it's got a little bit of everything. I just wanted to mess around with it. I have no idea if it's going to work. We have a couple other auras. The auras that we're using are really just ones that force their creatures to either do nothing, disable all abilities of artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, creatures, basically make it to where they can't attack us, they can't activate abilities, they can't really do anything, right? That's the objective. We don't care about attacking them. We're not going to be doing anything. So we have Eaten by Piranhas, we have Ossification, we have Assemble the Players, which allows us to cast stuff from the top of our library. We have Fey Flight, which gives us hexproof for 1 turn. It's a nice little flash hexproof. I really like this aura. So we can, just protect our area or protect our bloodletter. The thing is right now, at least before this set, everything seemed to be like each opponent sacrifices, nothing was targeted. And so hexproof was essentially worthless. But now it seems like some stuff may be targeting again, which is good. So we like that. We're also using this card that I can't even pronounce. We're also using Intercessor's Arrest, which is pretty good because you can enchant any permanent and it can attack. So you can do it with a creature land, which is pretty cool because you don't usually get to do that. But it can attack, block, crew vehicles. Its activated abilities can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. So yeah, I mean, it's really, really good. The deck should be amazing. I cannot imagine a world where this deck loses a lot. This should be one of the top performing decks that we have, hands down. All right, coming in at number 3. This one might actually be one of the ones that I'm most hyped for. I'm not going to lie. I don't know how much it's going to work, but it's all revolved around the Macabre Reconstruction. So this spell costs 2 less if a creature was put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn. So you can mill yourself, you can blow up the board, you can basically do whatever you want, right? And you get to return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. It's pretty nice, considering it's 3 colorless and a black. If you get 2 creatures, like if 2 creatures die, you attack, 2 of them die, you can pay 1 mana, bring them both back. It's kind of nice, actually. It's really nice. So in this particular deck, we're going to be doing some mill action, just a little bit of self-mill action. So for those cards that we're doing the self-milling action, but could also go into the graveyard, would be Shigeki, the Jukai Visionary. It's just a nice little ability of the 2 tap, and then you get to reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put a land into play, tapped, and then put the rest in the graveyard. So that could just easily put 2 creatures into the graveyard. It could put stuff that we don't want in the graveyard, but, that means we can also still get it out with its other ability, its other channeled ability, which is you channel it, discard it, and you return a non-legendary card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, obviously, it's an X ability. It's double X and 2 green. So it is very mana hungry when you want to do it, but it is a very, very, very good card for both milling, ramping, and getting stuff back. The problem is that most of the good cards that we have in the deck are all going to be legendary, but the cards that we want to get back in our hand are not the legendary ones. So it's kind of irrelevant. You know what I mean? So the other cards we have for milling are going to be Cemetery Tampering, which is Hideaway 5. So when it comes into play, you look at the top 5, find a card you want, and hopefully it's going to be a boom headshot world spell, because the world spell is amazing. It's kind of what we're going to win with. But Cemetery Tampering, after you do the Hideaway, at your upkeep, you can mill 3 cards. And then if there are 20 or more cards in your graveyard, 20 so much, you can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So it's pretty nice. But getting 20 cards in your graveyard is going to be pretty difficult. So another card we have for milling is going to be the Eccentric Farmer. When it enters battlefield, you mill 3 cards, and then you can return a land from your graveyard to your hand. This is just nice so you don't miss a land drop. That's really all it is. And it is a big body. It's a 2/3, so it's just kind of there to exist. We have Depopulate. Depopulate's obviously amazing because we can blow up the board of these garbage creatures that we have that we don't really need, just to cast our Macabre right afterwards for 1 mana. So it's more of a 5 mana board wipe at that point, but we're also able to get stuff back. So it's fantastic. If you look into it, pretty good. Again, our main win condition is the World Spell. World Spell is super cool. I think everyone forgot about this card. Either that or I just don't play enough Standard. But the World Spell, it's a 7 mana saga. Maybe that's why nobody plays it. But It has read ahead, so you can choose 1, 2, or 3 chapter, whatever you want to start at. You get to look at the top 7 cards of your library, and you may reveal a non-saga permanent card from among them and put it into your hand and put the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. You get to do that for the first 2 chapters. And then 3rd chapter, put up to 2 non-saga permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. This is the awesome part. So, obviously, we're going to be returning 2 creatures from our graveyard to our hand with the Macabre Reconstruction, right? That's the most important part. And then the world spell, we can just play that hopefully with just Cemetery Tampering. But if we do have to hardcast it, we can hardcast it, I suppose, if we really need to. We don't really want to, but we can if we really. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. You know what I'm saying? So, the creatures we are putting down are the Serac and Goreclaw and the Yargul and Multani. All right? And it's these 2 creatures specifically. Okay? So the Serac and Goreclaw, it's just a 6/5 with trample. Other creatures you control have trample. It's pretty cool. And then whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains haste till end of turn. This is very good because we want the 1/1 counter and we want the haste. We want all of that. That stuff's good. Because Yargul Multani is an 18/6 with nothing. Just an 18/6. It's just massive, right? So when we put him into the battlefield at the same time, that means that Yargul Multani is going to go bloop, bloop, bloop and get +1/+1, but then it's also going to have trample, and then it's also going to have haste. So it's going to be a 19/7 with trample and haste, which is disgusting. That's actually disgusting. However, it's only 19 damage if they don't have any creatures, because if we blew up all the creatures the turn before and then they want to do whatever it is that they want to do and they're not able to rebuild yet, whatever it may be, we have a lot of lands that enable us to give the creatures more plus abilities. So we have Drannith Ruins ready to go that gives a non-human creature 2 +1/+1 counters as long as it entered the battlefield this turn, which it will be. And then we have Restless Prairie. Whenever it attacks, other creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So that will take it up from 19 to a 20, or the Ruins will take it up to a 21. So hopefully they never get the chance to actually do anything. But at the same time, we can still have other creatures that are relatively cheap that we can play and get the benefit from the Goreclaw. So if there is any little extra damage that we have to punch through, we don't only have to rely on Yargul and Multani, but it is going to be our main source of winning. And I like it. It's going to be fun. Yeah, this one's going to be fun. I can't wait for this one. I'm excited. Now, this second deck is basically just all green. It's just a green deck. That's all it is. That's all there is to it. It's literally just a green deck. I mean, if you get out your magnifying glass, you might be able to see just like somewhere in there you might be able to see a little bit of black and a little bit of white, but not really. So what we're doing in this deck is we're really just ramping like crazy, and we're going to cast Outrageous Robbery. Now, I don't think this card is very good, but it could be, maybe. So, it is a X double black. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down. You may look at them and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. So, first of all, it's very important to note that it says play, meaning we can actually play lands and not just cast their stuff, right? We can spend mana as though it was mana of any color to cast any of their spells. So if we do like X equals 10, we get to exile top X cards of their library and just cast 10 spells, or, play one land and cast 2 spells or something. I don't know. We're not going to be able to do a whole lot that early, but like I said, we're ramping a lot. We're going to be doing a lot with Open the Way, Ironcrag Feat, Treasure Map, Spelunking, Augur of Autumn, Topiary Stomper. We have Greater Tanuki. We have Tidiana's Command. Okay. Everyone's going to call me crazy for Tidiana's Command, but with all of the new stuff going on with the investigations and everything, you know what I'm saying? Everybody's going to be putting stuff into their graveyards. So we got to have a lot of graveyard hate. I'm starting off light and only putting in 2 Tidiana's Commands in here. Only 2, okay? We only have 2. But we get to choose 2 options from this. There's a list of options. 6 mana, that's why I'm only putting 2 because it's still kind of expensive. But you get to exile target player's graveyard and you gain 1 life for each card exiled this way, which is pretty nice, especially if somebody's dumping a whole bunch of cards into their graveyard. We can gain like 5 or 6 life, something like that, you know, or more if we're lucky. We can search our library for up to 2 land cards, put them into the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. However, with Spelunking, all of our lands come into play untapped, which is amazing, which is basically one of the best parts about Spelunking. You're going to throw it down, you're going to draw a card, and then you're just going to bloop. All your lands come into play untapped. Even if the card says it comes into play tapped, it's still going to be untapped. So it's fantastic. We love it. One of the other modes, create 2/2/2 green bear creature tokens. Not this kind of bear, but like a raw kind of bear, right? And then, of course, we could put 2 1/1 counters on each creature we control. We don't have any creatures. I guess we have Topiary sponsor. I think I always say Topiary sponsor. Always sponsor instead of stomper. I don't know why. It's one of those things. It's just a word. I can't say it. We should look into that. It's a good thing we have all of our tools to look into this problem. We have concluded. We have figured it out. The answer is we need sleep. Perfect idea. But yeah, so for the most part, we're just going to be searching for 2 lands, and we're going to exile their graveyard and get some life. We may get a couple bears just for some blockers, but that's pretty much it. That's all we're going to do with that. The Greater Tanuki is amazing. It is kind of expensive because we're only getting 1 land, but it is uncounterable because it's a channel ability. And later on in the game, if we don't have any basic lands for whatever reason, we can just play it as a 6/5 with trample, which is just kind of whatever, right? We're also running the Ogre in here, the green one. I've never played it before, so I thought it might be fun. It's just 5 mana 6/5 with trample, which is pretty generic. However, when it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library, and you may put a creature card and or a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest of the bottom in a random order. So, idealistically, we could get like a land and an Augur bottom, or a land and a Topiary Stomper. I almost said sponsor again. Topiary Stomper. I'm just going to keep saying it. And so there's a few things that we can get from it, but yeah, it was just an interesting thing. I thought maybe I'll give it a try. But if it dies, it does come back into play. As long as it dies and not exiled or countered or milled or whatever. Has to die. It turns into a land, which is nice. It just taps for green, but also has the ability of 2 and a green and tap to transform it and turn it back into the creature, which is great. We love that. So it's really hard to kill. Outside of that, the other new card that we are running in this deck, because there's not a whole lot, I'll probably address a lot of the lands, the surveil lands, as we go along to see how effective they are. But the other new card that we are going to be running is Buried in the Garden. Now, I am super hype about this. This was actually a card that I didn't even know existed until tonight. It's 4 mana. You enchant a land, and you exile a non-land permanent under that, it's basically an ossification, but 4 mana instead of 2, and it adds an additional land when you tap that land for mana, but it's a land of any color. So it's not like a Wolfwillow Haven to where it only taps for green. It's more of like a Gift of Paradise to where it can tap for anything. Except Gift of Paradise, both things tap for anything. But regardless, this is great because it's our ramp and our removal all in one package. And that's exactly what we're looking for. But outside of that, our removal is all going to come from the outrageous robbery, because it is, in fact, outrageous. But we're going to be doing a whole lot of ramp and a whole lot of casting their spells. People hate when we cast their spells, and that's what we love. We just love for people to hate us. All right, so this deck is kind of all over the place. What we're really doing with it is using Ashiok, Wicked Manipulator, and just trying to ult it as quickly as we can. Well, maybe not as quickly as we can. We're going to win with it as quickly as we can with the ult. So the -7, this is just 5 mana Ashiok for 5. The -7 is target player exiles the top X cards of their library, where X is the total mana value of cards you own in exile. Which is interesting because normally you wouldn't want to have a lot of cards that you own in exile, right? But if we can exile all of their cards based on the mana value we have in exile, then that's fantastic. So there are a lot of new split cards. And if you were unaware, these split cards, like for instance, Cease and Desist, Cease is 1 card. Technically it's 2 mana. And then Desist is 1 card. It's 6 mana. When it's in the graveyard or when it's in your hand, technically the mana value is 8. It's not 2 and 6. It puts it together. All right. So that is very important to note, because then if it's an exile and we activate Ashiok's ultimate, it's going to do it for 8 and not for 2 or whatever, because it is a split card. So one of the newer ones, Cease and Desist, it's 2 mana, exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. Again, there seems to be a lot of stuff with graveyards right now, so I think it's going to be very impactful to exile people's graveyards. Just saying. But then target player gains 2 life and draws 2 cards, and draws a card. This is 2 mana. We're going to exile 2 cards, gain 2 life, and draw a card for 2 mana. It's pretty good. Or we can go crazy and use Desist, which is 6 mana, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. So it's like a cleansing Nova, but more expensive. That would suck if we had to do that. But it is something that we can do, I suppose, if we actually needed to do that. The only artifact and enchantment that we even have in here are Collector's Vault and Urza Assembles the Titans. So Collector's Vault is just the 2 mana artifact. You can pay 2 to tap to draw a card, discard a card. And that is actually kind of relevant, obviously, because we need some stuff in our graveyard that we can exile or get rid of or do whatever it is that we need to do. And of course, Urza Assembles the Titans is what we are using to ult Ashiok as quickly as possible, or as efficiently as possible. So we do have some mill cards like Jace. Jace does excellent mill stuff. And then, of course, we have another new flip card, Push and Pull, which is destroy target tapped creature. And then Pull is put up to 2 target creature cards from a single graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. They gain haste until end of turn. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. This is really fascinating, because we get to mill ourselves a lot, or we can mill them a lot. But what we're going to do is we're going to mill ourselves. All right, we're going to mill ourselves a lot. And we're going to try to get 2 creatures out of here. We're going to try to get Kyrie and the new Conspiracy Unraveler. So Kyrie, the Swirling Sky. Ooh, fancy, right? It's a 6 mana, 6/6 flying ward 3. When it dies, we get to return any number of non-land permanents with total mana value 6 or less to their owner's hands, which is pretty cool. But not super useful. Or we get to mill 6 cards, then return up to 2 instant and sorcery cards from our graveyard to our hand. That's the good part. because that's when we can do anything else. We can bring back a cease and desist, or we can bring back the push and pull, which is almost guaranteed what we're going to bring back. And then, of course, with the Conspiracy Unraveler, the brand new card that we're going to be using, it is a 7 mana. Again, we're probably never going to be casting it. Just bring it back. It's a 7 mana 6/6 with flying. You may collect evidence 10 rather than pay the mana value for spells that you cast. Now, earlier on when I was talking about this deck, I was saying that the mana value for the split cards was important. And that's why it's important. Because that means a cease and desist being 8 mana is now relevant when you have to collect evidence for 10. So when you're collecting evidence, you want to have high mana value cards, but you don't want only high mana value cards in your deck, because if you have only high mana value cards in your deck, you can't cast anything, right? That's obvious. So these are really, really nice to have in your deck once you have the Conspiracy Unraveler, because you can do that. You can exile some stuff, everything except push pull, hopefully, and then you could just keep looping the Kyrie and the Conspiracy Unraveler. You just try to kill stuff as much as possible. You can mill yourself a bunch with the Jace, the Perfected Mind. You can -5 yourself to mill yourself for 15. We have Urza Assembles the Titans, that whole combo that I've ran for so long that still nobody picks up on, which is crazy to me because you can still instantly ult almost every Planeswalker with this. So we have Urza Assembles the Titans with Vraska, because that's how you need to do it. Urza Assembles the Titans, the first saga, you get to scry 4. Look for a Planeswalker. I mean, scrying 4 is already nice, but scrying 4 for 5 is trash, right? But scrying 4, and then if there's a Planeswalker at the top, you can reveal it, and if you reveal it, you put it in your hand. That's nice. That's not bad. So it's like scry 4, draw 1 if it's Planeswalker. But you also have to reveal it. But the second chapter, you can put a Planeswalker card with mana value 6 or less from your hand onto the battlefield for free, which is really cool. So we can do that with our 6 mana Vraska or 5 mana Ashiok. Unfortunately, we do have the 4 mana Jace, so hopefully we don't have to go that low on it, but we can if we need to. And then the best thing we can do at that point is, since that is chapter 2, we could play down Vraska, right? 6 mana, and then we can hard cast Ashiok if we wanted to. And then Vraska, of course, we can use her 0 to draw a card, pay a life. I think it does 1 damage, doesn't pay life. Does damage, draw a card, and proliferate. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to proliferate our other Planeswalker. Ashiok comes in with 5 loyalty, so we proliferate it to 6. And of course, we're going to proliferate our Urza Assembles the Titans, which then gets it to the 3rd chapter that allows us to activate loyalty abilities of our Planeswalkers twice this turn instead of just once. Which then means we can draw another card and proliferate again. So then we're going to take our Ashiok up to 7 instead of it coming in with 5, and we haven't even activated the ability yet. So now it's already at ultimate loyalty, and we've done nothing. If we already had Jace out, Jace could be at 7 or 8 or 9, and we could just do whatever it is that we wanted to at that point. But it's insane amount of I mean, we could actually just mill them flat out with Jace and then exile a bunch of stuff with Ashiok, and then just like, how do we want to do it first? We're milling ourselves. We're looping Kyries and Conspiracy Unravelers. We're basically going to be able to cast anything that we want to cast for free, because we're going to be able to get so many expensive cards in the graveyard. Worst case scenario, we cast a Farewell. We put everything into exile except for our Planeswalkers. And then we -7 Ashiok and we just win. That's the worst case scenario. And that's not even a bad scenario. It's a win scenario. There's nothing wrong with winning, usually. All right, so that is it for the top 5 decks that I'm super excited for. Those are ones that I built, and oh my gosh, I am so excited actually. This new set is crazy. I feel like Standard's been a little bit stale over the last couple sets, maybe. I don't know. The last set that came out was like kind of fun, but this set seems like it's going to be super fun. The only thing I worry about is that the Shieldred's just going to mess it up again. It seems like black is still really powerful. It seems like they buffed black again. So it's a little unsettling because of that, but you know, you kind of just got to deal with it. We'll deal with it as it goes, but hopefully we don't have to deal with it too much. Regardless, if you like the video, make sure to do all the YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. I will investigate the comments for all the comments. If you have a super cool janky deck, I want to see a link to the list below, okay? All right, let me see it. Catch you later.